Hi, I'm Ryan with Leerburg, and today we're going to show you how to make your own leather dog collar. So for the last almost 30 years, Leerburg has been purchasing our cow hides from here in the States and having them tanned to our specifications. As far as where we source and tan our hides from, it's actually a bit of a trade secret. So much so as I don't even know where they come from. But today we're going to show you how we use that leather to make our own leather dog collars. We offer all of the different pieces needed to put together your own leather collar. So there's a few pieces that you would need to purchase, and there's a few pieces that you would need to provide on your own. So I'm going to go through each of those pieces and explain to you what each of them are. So first, you're going to need a leather strap, and we sell two different leather straps as far as length. We have a 1-inch leather strap that's 32 and 3/4 inch long. And the reason why they're always this long is if you have a smaller dog, you can just trim down some of the leather, but all of them are going to be the same length. And we have our 3/4 inch leather strap, which is 29 inches long. So again, it's plenty long, and you're going to just have to trim it down depending on your dog's size. We do offer both sizes of these leather straps in brown and black. Next, you're going to need the hardware, and if you buy our collar making kit, this will come standard with brass hardware as well as the Chicago screws. So if you do want stainless steel in your collar, you'll just have to head over to the hardware page and you can buy each of these pieces separately. You also need some Chicago screws. So we use Chicago screws because they're easy, they thread together, you don't need any special tools for them other than a screwdriver. If you buy the kit, you will get 2 1/4 inch Chicago screws with a flat side on one side. This is a kind of a flat polished side, which is much cleaner and looks better. And then you'll have a longer, this is a 3/8 inch Chicago screw with screw points on either side. And I'll show you later where we use this Chicago screw specifically. The equipment you have to provide yourself, this is a leather hole punch. If you don't have a leather hole punch, they're relatively cheap. You can go out and find one of these. Amazon sells them, they're 10-15 bucks at the most. If you don't have a leather hole punch, you could use a drill just to drill the holes. So you don't necessarily have to have this or go buy one. You could use a drill. These do punch nice clean holes, so they're nice to have, but it's not necessary. This is Loctite. This is a thread locking glue. We put these in our collars with the Chicago screws so that they don't come undone. We have a utility knife, and I've recently changed out the blade, so I have a fresh, sharp blade in here, and just a regular Phillips screwdriver. So we have two different styles of Chicago screws. These two are the same. They're 1/4 inch Chicago screws with a polished flat side and then a screw point on one side. And if you're not familiar with what a Chicago screw is, they're a rivet basically that is threaded together. And we also have this is a 3/8 inch one. The difference between this one is that it has screw points on both sides. So you'll see a Phillips screw point on that side and then a flathead screw point on this side. And the reason they have them on both sides is if you want to make sure that the screws are super tight so I can hold it on one side and screw on the other. And with these flat ones, once they get snug in with the leather, they stay pretty well. And then if you add in a little bit of Loctite, they're not going to go anywhere. So we do offer our hardware in two different styles. We have a brass and a stainless, and both of these come in both 3/4 inch and 1 inch widths, depending on the size of leather you're using. If you do buy a kit, you're gonna get these 3 pieces as well as the 3 Chicago screws standard, so they'll come brass, and then these ones will be stainless. But you can buy the stainless hardware independently or separately on our hardware page. So again, today I'm going to be making a 1-inch collar for my dog Bailey. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to taper this end a little bit, just so when I bring it back over, we don't have too thick pieces. So what I'm going to do is just kind of try to shave off some of that leather and taper it down. So I just used my utility knife to taper this down so it thins out at the end, about 1 inch long. So now when I fold this over, this is going to sit more flush to the other leather as opposed to having 2 big pieces back to back. So the first 2 holes I'm going to put in the collar are going to be these holes where the buckle goes through. So it needs to be a long hole. So what I'm going to first do is put 2 holes on either end, and then I'm going to cut between them to open that up. And I'm gonna do that about 4 or 5 inches up from the end of the collar. So I'm gonna bend that over. I'm gonna mark the end of the collar just with my thumb because I'll be able to see that. Then with my leather hole punch, I'm gonna punch my first hole in the center. And then I'll punch my second hole about 1/2 inch up from there. Again in the center. So we've got 2 holes, and now I'm just gonna use my utility knife to cut this space between them out. So now we've got this slot in here for our buckle, and so now we're gonna get our buckle in there. To make sure we have our buckle in correctly, what we're gonna do is, so my collar is gonna sit like this. Now my buckle, I wanna make sure that the pin on the buckle is facing the right way, and so the buckle should sit in there like this. And I'm gonna keep that orientation. I'm gonna slide it on the collar, put the pin through, and now we've got our buckle on the collar. And I just need to make sure that this slot is lined up so it's roughly centered. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a hole right behind the buckle, and that's where our long Chicago screw is gonna go. So I'm gonna mark that again just with my thumb. I'm gonna put a hole. So we've got our first hole on top, and I'm just gonna use a screwdriver, and I'm gonna poke that through and mark the other side of the leather. So I have a little mark here. Take my leather hole punch. Punch that hole. So now we can put our buckle back on. So now we've got our buckle back on. We're actually going to take this rectangular ring and put it on the long end. So one thing you'll want to note on the rectangular ring is it has a seam on the bottom. So I'm going to want to make sure that that's facing downward on my collar, and so it's not exposed on top. So right now we have our rectangular ring in with the seam inside of this gap and our buckle in. And now I'm going to take my first Chicago screw, the long one, and place it in those 2 holes. So this is going to show you why we need that long Chicago screw. Is if I use a short one, these aren't going to be able to reach because of this buckle's in the way. So I have the long one. I'll be able to get those threaded, and once they're threaded, I'll be able to tighten that up quite a bit. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our D-ring on, and so I'm going to put my D-ring kind of towards the end of this, the back side where that ends, because I'm going to want a Chicago screw right at the end to keep this all tight, and then I'm going to put my D-ring right upside that, and then my last Chicago screw is going to go right on the inside of that D-ring. So I'm going to punch these through both sides of the leather. So we've got these 2 holes going through these 2 pieces of leather that are lined up. I'm going to make sure my D-ring is on. I'm going to put one of my smaller Chicago screws through so that the flat side is upward. I would snug up this D-ring towards the end, and then I'm going to put my other Chicago screw right on the other side. So now I have my 2 Chicago screws in on either side of my D-ring. My rectangular ring and my buckle are up top. And the final thing I'm gonna have to do is put the holes in depending on the size of my dog, and so I'll show you that next. So I'm gonna size this collar to Bailey, and so how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna thread this through the collar like I would. I'm gonna put it to roughly a thickness I would want. So to mark it off, I just wanna mark this by, I'll just put an indent on this side. So now I find that mark, and with my hole punch, I'll put a hole there. And I'm probably gonna put 5 or 6 different holes in just so I can adjust it if needed. And I'm gonna do them, I'm not gonna use a ruler, but I'm just gonna use the width of my thumb to space them. So now we've got 5 holes in. Bailey's roughly the center collar, so I've got some room for adjustment. And the final thing we're gonna do is we're gonna trim off the end of this a little bit. So to size that, I'm gonna put the collar on her like it would normally be. I'll buckle it so it fits nicely. Put it through the D-ring. And so I like my collars to hang off about maybe 2 inches from the end of this D-ring, just so if I get it right underneath the D-ring, it comes off and then you have a strap flapping around. And so I like to make sure that if it goes in that D-ring, that it's gonna stay in there. So I would mark it, just with my fingernails and cut that off. If you wanted, you could just cut the square. I'm gonna round it off a bit just so it looks nicer. So I'm just gonna try to freehand this. So now I've got the rounded edge to my collar, and we have a finished collar. So it will just go on. Keep in mind, if you're looking to add years of life to your leather products, check out Leerburg's Leather Conditioning Cream and Spot Cleaner.